Ready to go live? Never. All right. Theoretically, we are live somewhere. I'm going to poke around now and take a look and see if that's true.
Okay.
It's true on Facebook.
Okay.
It's true on YouTube. We are live. We might be live on YouTube twice. So that's awesome. We are live on YouTube in 2 places. So I'm just going to let it ride on that. And we're just going to be live everywhere. And by everywhere, I mean Facebook and YouTube twice. Awesome. So we're starting this live just 1 minute early as we're testing to make sure things are working. And so I'll just fill this moment by saying, happy Thursday. How are you?
I'm good. Happy Thursday to you too.
Oh gosh, thanks. You know, in the Change Hub, my Facebook group, for people who are interested in talking about change or the Changed podcast, Thursday, we call it Thursday Change Musings. And instead of doing change musings, we're doing curly hair musings, which is really exciting. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Have you been reading through all of your hair school textbooks in preparation for this conversation?
I haven't, honestly. Okay, so if I'm being fair, the first thing that I learned when I went to beauty school was that everything I was going to do curly wise was going to be learned after beauty school. So I learned a lot of how to do a lot of traditional styling and sort of getting rid of curls, and specifically I think I learned how to manipulate hair to be something that it isn't, and then I used a lot of that, the same skills, but sort of applied it in different methods to sort of manipulate hair to be its best in its natural state instead.
That's so funny. So today I'll go ahead. This is our official start time. I'm going to go ahead and level set what we're doing. And so for this, I'm just going to make my face real big, and I'm just going to say hello to everybody who's tuning in live, and hello to everybody who is tuning in later. This is the first in the Just for Funsies series, which will be happening randomly and no kind of scheduled cadence. You just got to jump on them when they show up. And what the Just for Funsies series is about is, look, I like to be unserious as much as I like to be very serious. So when it comes to habit change and behavior change, sometimes a lighter touch is what's needed, and sometimes being really deep and philosophical and really looking and examining at what's happening is what's needed. But in service of the less serious side of me and you, the Just for Funsies series is intended to explore stuff not related to change directly. And the natural starting point came from a conversation that I had in my interview with Chandler Elizabeth Adam for episode 35. And later I'll put the links in here. My cat's going to join us as well today. This is exciting. Which is that in addition to change, people often ask me about my compromised. There we go. I'm back. I'm live again. Just for funsies. A lot of people ask me about my curly hair. And so this is a way to answer all of those questions. So we're going to go ahead and go there. In the future, I would like your suggestions. If you're in the Change Hub Facebook group, I've put a post in there where I'm asking you for suggestions. And there's been some really interesting ideas around dream interpretation or simply talking about dreams. There was also a great suggestion around what kind of stuff is, what kind of non-consulting materials are helpful to consulting clients? It's a very niche topic, just like curly hair. So there's a lot of possibilities. Please put your ideas there in the Facebook group. If you're not a member of the Facebook group and you're watching this on YouTube, the address to join is facebook.com/groups/Change Hub. And if you have no idea who I am and you just clicked on this because you heard it was about curly hair, my name is Aden Nepom, and I am the host of the Changed Podcast, a show Oh, interesting. I just got a message that we lost our stream to Facebook. I wonder if we can reconnect. Says we're live. Interesting. Huh. Well, I don't know what to say. Go live. We'll try doing it this way. Oh, look at that. Now we're live. Now we're live on Facebook. Okay, maybe. Exciting. So I just gave a thorough introduction. This whole live streaming with an interview person is new for me. So anyway, I just gave a whole introduction about the purpose of this session, but for those watching on YouTube, you've already seen this. So I'm the host of the Changed podcast. I talk about change, and now I'm going to be doing something completely different, which is talking about curly hair with my guest today, my real life hairdresser, Chandler Elizabeth. Say hi, Chandler.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. This Just for Funsies is just for funsies. We're being very unserious and talking about something that is actually quite meaningful to a lot of people, which is cutting, styling, coping with, loving, embracing curly hair.
Yeah.
How long have you been focused specifically on curly hair? Your whole hair career, or more recently?
Yeah, I didn't get into the hair industry until I was like a little bit older than a lot of people when they start. I was like 23 or 24, I think, and I had a really good haircut at a salon called Pearl Power, just like 6 months before that, and I'd never had a haircut that was really designed for the way that I wore my hair. I'd never paid more than like $15 for a haircut. And it was kind of, I had been growing my hair out for maybe a year and went to this place, met a woman named Chelsea who had gone to school for the exact same thing as me. We both had been theater majors and had decided we did not want to be actresses anymore. And she was only 2 years older than me, and she was already established in the salon. And I was just like, how did you do this? And she said that she met the salon owner and she had, paid for her to get all this training and essentially like put her through this program, and that there were salons that were doing it. And so I moved to Portland and started beauty school. And the slogan at the time was everything you didn't learn in beauty school. And so I did a 14-month program. It was 1,800, 1,700 hours of just learning, how to do hair. And then I did a 1.5 year long apprentice program at a salon that just did curly hair. I worked for them for about a year after that, and then I went independent and have been working in my own space, only focusing on curls for the last year as well.
So even though your space and your job and your hair and your tastes are now focused on curls, do you have any non-curly clients?
I don't have anyone who isn't. I have a lot of wavy clients, or some people even say swavy, straight wavy. Um, and if you go on YouTube right now and you type in curly girl method, the first thing that pops up is curly girl method for straight hair. And then the second thing that pops up is curly girl method for wavy hair. And the reality is that like 80% of the global population has some texture in their hair. And the quote that I like the most, that I think kind of applies to everything in life, is that people behave the way we treat them and things behave the way we treat them. And so if you treat your hair like it's just kind of fuzzy, or if you treat your hair like it's just kind of fluffy, or like it never cooperates, it's going to behave like that. And if you treat your hair like it's like, I always say I treated mine like jeans and I switched to treating it like satin. And it really is about how you wash it and how you style it and how you behave with it and what you put into it, and how you feel about it a little bit is going to like really affect sometimes the way that it turns out.
That's awesome. Okay, well, so I had some questions that were submitted ahead of time, and then I see that there are a couple of questions coming in on the live stream, which is excellent. So I'll take turns going between. And the first question that someone submitted ahead of time is, how do you style curls to be soft and not crunchy or sticky. So you're using products to try and control the curl. How do you make sure it lands in a way that's soft and touchable versus crunchy and sticky?
Yeah, it's really gonna be about the product that you use. A lot of product does have um, like, a little bit of a cast to it. And I tell people not to be afraid of the cast, because if
Mhm.
you're using a good high quality product, as soon as you squeeze it, it should soften. I know that the word gel scares a lot of people, but I love using like a nice gel that just my favorite brand that I use is Inner Sense Organic Beauty. I typically put it in when the hair is just soft and wet, like it feels like absolute seaweed. It's probably the wettest your hair will ever feel when I do it, and that is going to allow it to sort of dry with that kind of softness that the water brings in, but not have the crunch of just the product essentially. I almost always, when somebody says, I don't like gel because it's crunchy, I ask them to feel my hair, and I'm like, can you, like go like this with me? And they'll feel it, and they'll be, I'll say, is this okay? And they're like, yes, that's fine. And I'm like, I styled with a hard gel and a hard hairspray and a hard, like foam, because the reality is that for me at least, I have very fine hair, and it doesn't hold its own style as long as some people's hair. So some people can have curls that last for like 7 days, and mine are
Mhm.
probably like 2 days or 3 days, and then it needs to be restyled. And so I like a little bit of firmness in my product, but I want my hair to feel like hair at all times as well. And so I also do a lot of diffusing just on warm. And when I've completely finished and it feels like my hair is like dry and still has a little crunch to it, I actually switch the dryer to cool, and I just kind of, softly scrunch it a little with my hands, and kind of set the curl with the cold air. And that tends to soften it a little more as well without kind of fuzzing it too much.
Thank you. Speaking of product, so you and I have talked about the difference in when I'm in the chair, but we should talk about the difference now about salon products. This was another question that was submitted. What's the difference between salon products? We're always being told you have to use salon products if you really care about your hair, and
Yeah.
drugstore hair products. Um, is there a difference? And if there is a difference, what if you don't have salon budget and you've got to buy stuff at the drugstore?
Yeah. I am like a really big component that like no one should be shamed for the way that they clean themselves. And no one should be shamed for the way that they like attempt to make their hair not frizzy, or the way that they attempt to groom themselves. That's just like something that I always start off the bat with, especially growing up like on Suave and Garnier and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I've been able to work with those throughout my entire life and still have good hair days. And so um, I always say like a big component to a good hair day is a state of mind, and then the next part is product and some time that you're going to invest in it. But the biggest difference, honestly, there are really high branded quality, or like high brand products that are sold only to professionals, that have just terrible ingredients in them and are really no different than a drugstore product, and they
Wait, did
just
you
have a
just say hairable ingredients?
no, I said terrible, but I like terrible. um, no, terrible ingredients, like the number like one or number two ingredient in so many products, whether they're professional or drugstore, is dimethicone. And dimethicone is essentially like a plastic oil. There's a time and a place for it. It works great as a heat protectant, but we do have heat protectants nowadays that don't contain that as well, so you
Mm.
don't need it. It also is really great for like getting mats out of Shih Tzus, because it's like great for detangling. So it makes sense that it's in a lot of kinky, coily, curly conditioners, because it does have great slip to it. Some people don't feel like they have any issues with dimethicone, but the majority of people who I know who are using those products have a lot of buildup and have a lot of dryness in their hair, and it typically is only able to be really removed with a sulfate of some sort.
Mm.
And so, regardless of if you're using a professional line or if you're using a drugstore line, what I recommend is having a product line that you look at the ingredients of and don't look at the label, because there are no regulations with the hair industry like there are with the Food and Drug Administration. And
I
so
didn't know that.
it can say essentially like no silicones, and the second ingredient can be dimethicone. Or a lot of the times it will say no sulfates, no parabens, no dyes, and it's listing off all these things that are like, well, none of that should ever be in a conditioner anyway, but it's not saying no silicone, and so it's kind of like when you go buy a steak and it says gluten-free steak, and you're like, well, I understand that this shouldn't have carbs in it, you know, and so you really need to look at the ingredient list. There are plenty of clean lines that are affordable. I still feel like in the end, what I've found, and this is when I was living on a very strong budget versus not, is that I had a lot of products that were cheap that didn't work for me. And so when I just found a product that was like, yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but it has half the amount of water and it's twice as dense and it like you don't need to use as much and it's super concentrated, you might spend a little bit more at first and then you're going to use it way longer and you're not going to have a bunch of bottles that like you don't use. And so I always tell people that if they're able to invest in one thing that they could spend a little bit of money on rather than getting like 5 products that are cheap so they can have everything, get one nice conditioner and use it as like your leave-in conditioner, use it as a way to refresh by mixing it with a little bit of water in the morning and just kind of spritzing it all over and kind of letting your hair reset. You can use it as a mask if you want to leave it in, you know, like overnight kind of thing and then like rinse it out in the morning. There's like so many different options for it. It really is like the mascara of creating the look sort of thing.
So the product line you use is Inner Sense. Do you have a drugstore recommendation for people on a budget?
You know, I have ones that I used years ago. I have not really, and like I think I always tread lightly because I think for every time that for one that I'll recommend, I will maybe have another person who has some sort of issue with it sort of thing. But there's a couple of products I'm trying to think of that my clients have used for years that are really, really like I don't see any issues with, like Miss Jessie's is a common one. There is a something on Facebook that involves like a blueberry bliss type of product line. I don't know if
Delicious.
That is a common one. I'm like, I don't actually know the brand name, but I don't have a whole lot of recommendations when it comes to drugstore products. What I tell people is just look at the ingredients because each drugstore will have something that's sort of a little bit more clean. And then a lot of the times too, like co-ops and like, you know, like Trader Joe's, things like that are sometimes going to sort of have a little bit more of a cleaner ingredient list as well.
I use my styling product that I use is the TG Catwalk Curls Rock Curl Cream, and I've used it for like over a decade now. And it obviously gets me a curl that I'm happy with, and I know how to work with it, and I know how to put it into my hair and then diffuse in a way that leaves me with a result I like. But I've often suspected, like for about half of that amount of time, I've suspected that it's not a healthy choice and that I should switch to something else. Do you know anything? I've never really looked at the ingredients. Have you looked at the ingredients? Am I putting toxic plastic sludge on my hair every time I do that?
Honestly, I haven't looked at the ingredient list of that one. There is an app called, I believe it's called Think Dirty. And it's something that you can put your beauty products into, and it kind of rates them on a scale of 1 to 10 based off of the ingredients. And I know, like Inner Sense had like a 0 or a 1 for the most part on all of their products, and I believe Diva Curl had like between 8 and 10 on a lot of their products as well. So even if it is something that is like has a high, you know, kind of like a well-known brand name to it, if it has a lot of like synthetic fragrances in it and things like that, or just like a lot of heavier oils that haven't been really like processed properly, they can just kind of cause a lot of buildup and also be not that high quality of a product.
Yeah, I couldn't handle the Diva Curl stuff. I loved what I learned from the styling method, the curly girl method, I assume, but the products always left my scalp feeling terrible. So let alone the curls were like really heavy and weighted down. And as you know, I like my hair large and fluffy. I let it air dry a little bit today So it's not as big and fluffy as I like, but it's
I want to
fine.
like flip upside down and shake mine. So I'm like, it's falling. It's getting
Yeah,
less
I'm like,
voluminous.
this is
Yeah.
a thing I do a lot. I feel like this is a thing curly people need to know about, where you get underneath that top layer so you don't frizz it, and then you just sort of like shaggy dog your experience, and then you gently, without squeezing, shift your things around. Didn't really make much of a difference this time, but it often does. All right. Well, thank you for going down the product discussion. I'm going to ask, we've got, what's the biggest challenge in cutting curly hair is a question that somebody has asked in the, actually it's my husband, which is awesome. I'm hoping he's thinking about wanting to cut my hair. I cut his sometimes.
I'd say that the biggest challenge is like the shrink up, the bounce back. You can really like only take a half inch off of a curl, but it can make it so much that like that little half inch was really holding it down and elongating it, and then it just springs right on back up, and you're like, I really only took off a tiny bit, but it feels like it bounced off a lot. And so when you're cutting wet, it's almost unavoidable. And even when you're cutting dry, you really have to err on the side of, if it isn't someone's hair you cut before, make sure that you know that there's a chance that they're going to end up looking like a little more ringlety than you anticipated, because it's reacting to the way that you're cutting it, and it's also going to react to the way that you style it.
Talk to me about this business. I'm going to lean in here. Okay. So we know this is true, and this is the front of my head. You've played with this, but this is the curliest this section of my hair ever gets. Yeah. Whereas like right nearby, I've got like ringlets going on, like tight ringlets. And this is all in the same plane. So when we're cutting, I cut my own hair during the pandemic. Now I'm talking like I'm an expert. I need to make an appointment. I need to make an appointment with you. But now that things are open, like I need to get in your chair. But yeah, so talk to me about that. The different, there was one over here that was just driving me crazy. The different curl patterns that live next door to each other. Can you really successfully cut curly hair wet? And expect it to hold its shape the way you would with with straight hair, rather?
I think I do believe that you can. I don't personally do it. I feel like a lot of people who have been trained for like a long time and who have done both dry cutting and both wet cutting on curly hair and have had a lot of experience with that are more comfortable using or doing a cut that's wet. I just am not personally, but I know that there are like the brand We Dodd teaches a wet cutting technique, and there are curl specialists all over the world who do, incredible work, and they do all of their cuts wet. One thing that I took from, it was a barbering class, but it was a man who said, if anyone ever tells you there's only one way to do something, that's someone who's fallen victim to their own ego, and you don't have to fall victim to that too. And so
that's just a good, we said we were only going to stick to Funsies stuff here, but like that, if this was an episode of the podcast, that'd be in the show notes. Like that's a good applicable to many areas of life.
To everything. Yeah. So like, the truth is that you can do the same work. You can create a beautiful shaped haircut.
Oops, I lost your sound for a moment there, Chandler. Not yet. I wonder. It's exciting that we lost your sound. It's not that exciting, but.
Okay. Wait, is it back?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay. I'm sorry.
And plus we got some sweet glimpses of your amazing manicure while you figured out your sound.
I bought a guitar, so one hand is short and one hand is long. I'm like trying to learn how to play, trying to teach myself on YouTube. Okay, I'm so sorry. What was I saying?
Okay, we were talking about the different textures of hair in one haircut. Can you really cut that wet? And you shared that amazing thing from the barbershop course that you took about how it's not really one right way to do things.
Exactly. And so other people in the world do know how to do that, and they create really great cuts and really great experiences for people, which I think is the most important part of the haircut. My reality is that some of my best haircuts were ones that were done like at a great clips, and it just was about how I felt and that they did exactly what I asked for. And that was more important to me than any time I paid extra and had somebody do it the way that it was supposed to be done, but I didn't feel like I was listened to. So I think that those are the most important things when creating the proper thing for that person.
Mhm.
That being said, the medium of curls is one that is sometimes going to live really curly and is other times going to live completely stretched. And so I prefer to see the way it lives completely stretched, at least when it's dry,
Mhm.
versus seeing the way that it's completely stretched when it's wet, because that does add about a little, like about 20 to 30% of extra length to it just naturally when it's wet. It elongates even with straight hair. And so what that creates is having to work very quickly because as the hair is being cut, it's also drying. And I find that for me, I like to be able to take a whole hour to an hour and a half of just sitting and like watching the way that it settled after I went to the other side for 15 minutes and went on that and then was like,
Right.
oh wait, this side is still too, too full here. And so that's how I prefer to work. But I know that there are other people who like really like a very structured, sturdy thing, and it's more about how you style it. So they will take something and make it as structured and as neat as possible and all one length exactly, and then they'll style it so that it looks not like that. And that's completely fine too. It's really all about what the individual wants. And also, I like that it's something that I do that like a lot of other people don't do. There's only like I think one for every 10,000 people with curly hair, only one person is trained in the method I know, and so I feel like it's special.
I think it's special. I'm also relieved to hear that I'm not the only one who sits in the chair for an hour and a half to 2 hours getting my hairs cut. I always thought it was just me, um,
No,
which felt a little
no,
bit special, but also it's like it's thick, but it's not that thick.
yeah, no, no. Well, we take a little extra time with you just because we're having fun, I think.
I'd like to think that's true for sure. Um,
Yeah,
my previous hairdresser who lives in Texas, Georgia Bramhall, who would have been fun to invite into this conversation in retrospect as well. I think you two would have so much to
yeah,
talk about. But she also would take this amazing amount of time. And I just like for years now, that's just what I'm used to. Well, okay. So one of my biggest surprises, by the way, I'll just shift gears into biggest surprises about curls. One of my biggest surprises when I went from styling my hair straight to styling my hair curly was just like the difference in philosophy of styling. Like you mentioned this a little bit with beauty school at the top of the conversation. But when I had straight hair, it was a lot about like controlling where each little piece went. And with curly hair, it's a lot about just like being surprised and delighted about what your hair is deciding to do today and sort of like facilitating its best outcome, but allowing the hair to decide the outcome more than anything. Like I made a joke right before I hit the go live button. I was like, well, this is just what this piece is doing today. I'm just going to surrender to that because it doesn't matter. This theoretically, I have a haircut to have my bangs centered and my hair parted in the middle. And what's happening is the opposite. It's like a total side slung situation today. And I'm just like, that's just what it's doing today. What has been one of your biggest surprises
yeah.
about curly hair and curl philosophy?
I think my biggest surprise is like seeing the versatility of one person's hair or one person's head, what can happen really consistently, watching it sort of change, especially if they've been, like you said, that philosophy of trying to control it. If they've been using really, really strong feed, they've been using really strong chemicals or really strong products to try and control it, and then watching it transform. And it's not just that like that their hair has a lot more shine to it and is a lot softer and is like that they're able to get it to do surprisingly what they're trying to get it to do easier, even though it may not always be exactly perfect. It still is like a lot more of a generally like just this, comes to their lifestyle a lot easier. It also like kind of takes a little bit of a weight off of their shoulders. Specifically, anyone who has chosen not to. This is the same with coloring their hair as well, but has chosen not to, cut it all off and instead to grow it out all at one time. And they sort of have like this line of demarcation of where it was once straightened and is now curly, or where it was once jet black and is now white, silver white, kind of coming in. Seeing that really vulnerable state that people are in publicly and visibly for such a long time, and then watching it like slowly drift away as they're getting a trim off each time and still getting to keep their length and still getting to keep the haircut that they're comfortable with the entire time, is like a very cool thing to watch. I've always been a just cut it off and grow it back in type person. So instead, seeing people be like, no, I'm going to keep it long, even if it looks a little funky, we're going to work with it. And I like that.
That's awesome. All right. I just have a couple more quick questions. And then, and so, yeah, last call if you're watching live and you want to submit a question here. So I want to talk a little bit about finding and communicating with your stylist. We have a question here about how you pick what haircut to give people, which is also interesting. But I want to talk about the stylist relationship because I think that that's really important. So the question here was, how do you find the right stylist for your hair, which isn't really a curl specific question, but an important question. How do you assume that every stylist is capable and that you just don't know how to ask for what you want, or and you have to learn that? Or what do you recommend for finding the right stylist for your hair?
I think it's a mixture of things. I think going in and knowing what you need and what you want is the most important thing, because in the end, you can say to someone, you're the expert, just do what is supposed to be done for me. And they can have a completely different taste of what they think will look best on you than what you're going to like. So you really have to be like, they might say, listen, I really think you could lift up here. And that person might be like, I want to have my hair long here because I feel like it makes my face look bad if it's not, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to take that away from you because that's an insecurity that has nothing to do with, like me. And I don't want to give you something that's going to make it worse, kind of thing, I think that finding the perfect stylist for you is sometimes a trial and error process.
Yeah.
Sometimes also like doing a little bit more research and being a little more patient than the average person. We have this desire that like we need to get our hair cut and we need it now. And the reality is that like really, really great stylists sometimes are booked out super far, or even if they're not booked out super far, their schedule might not work with you because they only work during the weekdays. They've got kids or they've got something else going on. Yeah. So like you need to just be patient enough to really like wait to find the right person. But also the way that people find me, the two largest ways are social media and word of mouth. So if you see someone who has hair like yours, or that your hair could look like theirs that used to when you were a kid, or you had one good haircut 10 years ago and it looked like that and hasn't since, or whatever, go talk to that person and ask them, do you have a stylist? Where do you go? Do you have any recommendations? Facebook groups and like Reddit and Instagram are all places that people find me, and I didn't even post anything. I
actually was going to suggest that as well. But I will say, well, first of all, the way I found you was I went in to get some hummus at, I can't remember the name of the restaurant right now. Shalom, y'all. And the girl who came to wait on me, I say girl because she had to be in her 20s. She looked very, very young and very beautiful. Not to say that middle-aged women, well, I'm getting into another territory altogether, but she had the most amazing haircut. And I asked her, where do you get your haircut? Because I was on the hunt for a new hairdresser. I'd been doing trial and error and was getting exhausted. And she said that she was getting her haircut by you, but also she had literally just gotten her haircut that day. And I was like, done, I'm going, I'm calling, and I haven't looked back. Yeah, it was amazing. So definitely, I think the best way is to notice people's hair when you're out and about, grocery shopping, living your life. And when you see someone, ask them where they get their haircut. The nice thing about it is they'll be flattered because this is such a huge compliment. So you don't have to feel shy about asking those questions to find a hairdresser. And then the other thing I would suggest is I see a lot of people asking in Facebook groups for hairdresser recommendations. When you ask for that, when you go into a Facebook group or you pose the question on Instagram or Twitter, wherever you are, I would suggest you ask to see pictures of what their hair looks like that they're thrilled about. Like, send me a picture of your best haircut and tell me who cut it. And it's because otherwise it's literally just word of mouth without knowing if the style is a fit, if they understand your hair texture, if any of that stuff. So I think being able to see images of what people think looks amazing on them will help you make a decision about what you want in order to feel like you look amazing as well.
Yeah.
The last question that I have related to this, Chandler, is so once I know that I've landed a hairdresser that I'm sticking with, there's still that thing about like choosing the right haircut, communicating what kind of hairstyle I want, all of that stuff. What is the best way for people to, or do you think there is a best way for people to communicate what it is that they want? Like I have really specific taste, as you know, and as many people might guess, I think I'm pretty direct about being like, I want this, I don't want that. This piece of hair is bothering me. This one won't curl. Here's what you need to know. Probably overly communicative. But what do you suggest in terms of communicating clearly with your hairdresser? Because I know that like if somebody says, I want layers, that might mean something different than what they think it means.
Absolutely. I think being very, very, very specific about what is going on their head, showing them in the mirror and doing like a full 360 and being like, do you know what you look like from the back? Do you know what you look like from the side? Do you know that what you're asking for right now is gonna, like, yes, it'll look nice from the front, but may give you a bit of a rat tail, or or do you want it to look a little bit, this short in the back? Is that what you're looking for? Really making sure that they're aware that no matter what type of picture is snapped of them, that they're not going to be like, oh my God, why is my hair like that kind of thing, even if it's what they asked for, and just really making, because some people just want a funky haircut and you just got to give it to them, even though like you maybe would want to like give them something a little bit more structured or something like that. So it's this really fine balance of listening to what the person is asking for and also making sure the person knows what they're asking for. Because it's a different language that even hairstylists have trouble sometimes understanding each other. We were taught, maybe one person was taught that the way that this is done is at a 90-degree angle, and the other person is taught this is called a concave layer, and so those are maybe the same thing, but you're like, what is this?
Oh my God, I've never heard that word.
Terminology that can really...
concave layer, like that's new terminology for me. I'm now going to have to start Googling concave layer. By the way, Brenda has arrived to the live stream and says, just want to tell you, you're beautiful, Chandler. Is Brenda your mom?
Oh, is that my mom?
Is Brenda Klein your mom?
Thanks, Mom.
That's amazing. I love that. Mom. During your interview on the podcast, we established what a treasure your mother is, so that your mom has shown up to tell you you're gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm blushing a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I have another question. Angela's asking, my hair texture has changed to curly over the past year, and it's all overwhelming going from a routine that was wash and go to using curl cream, gel brush, microfiber towel. What are some tips? And I think I'm going to read between the lines here. What are some tips for making this transition easier for a new wavy lady?
Yeah. There's a huge online resource. I'd say like don't get too sucked into it, because some people are a little crazy and you just gotta kind of like not overthink it. Try and simplify everything you're doing. Like if you're feeling like you're wavy, you probably don't need a curl cream at all. Even I don't use curl creams. I don't, like you probably need less, and just start treating your hair with this styling method in general, but just using like a gel and a diffuser, and be okay with having some weird hair days, like understand how to style your hair outside of a wash and go, so that way, if it is being funky, you can put it up in a little half do. If it's too short to like completely put up, you can do some type of slick it back or wear some type of like accessory or headband or something while you're working with it. But don't overthink it, and don't try it. Sometimes switching from the lightest products in the world to then being like, I'm going to grab this product because I'm dealing with this crazy hair, and then you sort of start like getting it, putting a little too much into it, and it becomes a hassle. And so all of the curly girl method stuff that is on the internet is made to make your life easier. If it's
Mhm.
making your life not easier, then it's not for you, and that's okay. There's a different way to style your hair that is for you, that shouldn't be a source of stress for you. The way that like all of this stuff that's on the internet is a resource to help you. And if like doing one version of it doesn't work that day, you just got to let it go. It can't be a cause of, a cause of stress that's like, my hair is the
Yeah,
worst thing in the world.
I
It's like
love
some days we just
that.
have bad hair days. Don't
I
don't worry too much
remember
about that.
I remember when I transitioned to styling my hair curly, there was a ton of trial and error, including, I mean, one of the things that I used to do in the early days was I would let it air dry, which took 8 hours, and then I would use a curling iron to straighten it. That was a thing that I did, and it would take about 20 minutes to straighten it. And so I was afraid that styling my hair curly was going to be more effort filled and take more time, but it's kind of a wash when I did the math on how much time I was spending. And so, yeah, there were some awkward trial and error things, finding the right products, finding all that stuff for my hair texture. And there was also way less resource available. So I didn't have the luxury of just watching. Well, I probably did. It just didn't occur to me 10, 15 years ago to get on YouTube and look for stuff. But so there was a lot of trial and error. I discovered that turning my head upside down to blow dry instead of blow drying the way I would have blow dried if I was trying to blow it out to straight. I discovered that that was how I prevented the top from getting this layer of fuzz. And I just had to figure that out. I was like, if doing this is causing fuzz, then I would like to change where the fuzz lives, was my thought process. So I tipped my head upside down, and now that's standard practice. I don't know if it was always standard curly genius stuff, but like now everybody's like, first you're going to do it, tip your head upside down, then we're going to go to the side, then we're going to go to the other side, and then finish it up sitting up, but that was trial and error for me. So I love that you're suggesting some patience, and to do less rather than stress about doing it right off the bat. Similar to growing out bangs, I say ironically, because I recently was trying to grow my bangs out, and then I was like, nope, you have to have a strategy in place for the transition, which is like a jaunty hat or a really sweet headband or a cool updo or whatever. So I'm glad you brought all that up. I have this theory that and I'm keeping you over time, so I just want to do a little time check-in because we're getting some. Oh, Angela says thank you for that. That's awesome. So one last question, if you have the time for it, and then I'll thank you and let people move about their day. So the last question that I have is, I have this theory that it's possible to have an ideal haircut for your individual hair texture and face shape. Do you think that that's possible? Is that a thing that you think, like, if somebody were to come in and be like, here's what my hair looks like, here's what my face looks like, can you make me beautiful? What would you do with that?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question. Yes, that like a really, really long face or kind of a long neck that can kind of accentuate that or pull away from that if you're wanting to accentuate it or pull away from it. There are haircuts that, like, I remember when I was in beauty school, it was a really incredible video to see the way that somebody's face shape looked, when their hair was like this, and then they would go like this, and they had just like huge round cheeks that you couldn't see because their layers were around their face really hiding it. So I like my beauty school instructor, she would have people kind of tell her growing up that like there were certain haircuts she couldn't have because of her weight, and because of the face shape that she had. And she was like, I don't care. I'm a big girl. I wanna have a short haircut. Give me a short haircut. I'm gonna be a big girl with a short haircut or a long haircut kind of thing. Don't you know? And so like there are certain things that you don't want to take away from what people are asking for, But there are certain things that you'll be like, well, with the shape of your head, if you shave it off this side to have an undercut, it's going to look like an egg. And that is just the reality of it. You know, it's going to be really ovular shaped. And that's like, and if you're okay with that, that's cool. And I say that because I did that to myself. So I was like, I realized that that helped me look a little more ovular when I had no hair on this side of my head and it was very flat. It was like, okay. But it was one of my favorite haircuts I've ever had. So it's kind of a yeah, yes and yes.
Well, Chandler, Elizabeth, it has been so fun to talk about curls with you. I have no doubt that we could talk about curls for a lot longer, but we have other things to do with our days, I'm sure. So, you know, I'll just save it for the next time I'm sitting in your chair, which I'll get online and schedule to be very soon. I want to thank you. Are there any final things, words of wisdom, curl recommendations that, like, if there's one thing that people should keep in mind about curls, what is that?
I'd say, I'm like, oh goodness. It should be fun. Just let it be fun. You know, it's not, there are people who have straight hair and they curl their hair to have a good time.
I love that takeaway.
Like,
it should be fun.
For special occasion kind of. I'd say even on even when you feel like you're having the worst hair day, someone will come up to you and say, "I love your hair." So just be like, "Oh, you know what? That's great." The grass ain't greener on the other side; it's greener where you water it. Is the quote I like. So water your grass if you're feeling like your hair isn't what you want it to be, and it'll be a little bit greener.
Yay, thank you, Chandler. That's beautiful, wonderful, and thank you. You can follow Chandler on Instagram, check out at Portland Curl Room, and check out at Transgender Agenda. That's the best way to find Chandler, Elizabeth. And one of the things that I love about your Portland Curl Room Insta is that you get to see these time-lapse videos of curly haircuts happening in action. They're like 2-second makeovers, but it's really like an hour and a half of a makeover. It's really cool. So definitely go follow at Portland Curl Room. And you can, of course, follow me at Speaking of Communication. Though if you're looking specifically for answers about curls, you won't find them on my Instagram, but you will find other forms of inspiration. Tune into the Changed podcast. You can listen to Chandler's interview in episode 35 from a couple weeks back. And you can listen to the Changed podcast anywhere where podcasts are. And feel free to, if you want to contribute to the longevity and success of the podcast, to contribute to our Patreon, patreon.com/thechangedpod. Thank you for your time today, Chandler. This has been so fun.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All
I
right.
had a great time.
Yay.